Hey, Matthew, how are you, sir?
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Are you in Louisiana? Is that where I'm talking?
I am.
I love it. I love it. First off, welcome to the podcast. That's number one. And number two, I've moved from San Francisco to Miami. I'm part of that San Francisco exodus. So,
I've heard about that. Congratulations, I guess.
yeah, thank you. And now, what's going on with you? Are you seeing any New York license plates, California license plates? What's going on in New Orleans?
Oh, well, it's the middle of the pandemic, of course, so all the parades are canceled this year, unfortunately. There's people still trying to make the best of it and celebrate as well as they can. There's been the invention of house floats. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Oh, God, no. I'm dying. Talk to me. What is that?
Yeah, so people now, instead of decorating up the floats, it costs several $1,000s to ride on one of the parades. And so people that aren't able to ride this year, they're paying that money, they're decorating up their houses like they would a float. So now all throughout the city, there's hundreds and hundreds of these houses that have been just ornately decorated the same way that you would see on the floats, with these huge dinosaurs and Beauty and the Beast themes and you name it, sports, nature, whatever. It's quite the sight. It's really cool. I think people like it so much. It's kind of a new tradition, I think, that's formed out of this pandemic.
My freshman year, I went to Tulane University. New Orleans has a soft spot in my heart. Tipitinas and that whole culture is just incredible. And you just brought back some incredible memories. And I love the resiliency and creativity of that town. It's always been one of my favorites.
It's a fun city. It really is. I've only been here a couple of years now, but it's a lot of fun.
And one of the things we like to always start with the show is just a little bit of empathy and empathy management. What did you do to get through last year to stay mentally strong and mentally healthy?
That's a tough one. I mean, I think for me, the important thing was really to focus on your relationships and trying to, like, I have a wife and 3 kids. So for me, trying to spend time with them was important. I also have been focusing a lot on my health, eating well and working out and those kinds of things. It's one of the messages I sent out to my team was around, trying to focus on mental and physical health. And they're very related. I don't think you can be mentally well if you're not physically well, and vice versa, right? They go together. So, it's one of the things I was really challenging my teams is to make sure that they're prioritizing taking care of themselves. It's always important, of course, but definitely I feel like a little bit more important now than even normal.
Yeah, I agree. I think empathetic management wins. I think those questions of what can I do to help you, but keep saying it literally, what can I do? I mean, everyone's home is in different stages of stress, right? Whether it be job uncertainty or kids staying home for school. There's not one family that's not having some type of stress.
No, absolutely. It's been tough. The schools were closed, starting in March of last year, and were closed for the rest of the year. And then when they opened this year, they were closed for a bit. And then, after coming out of the Christmas breaks, closed a little more. So, it's been challenging, having the kids at home and then coordinating. And I'm fortunate enough that my wife doesn't have any work responsibilities, so she can take care of the kids and their schoolwork. But when you have 2 working parents, that would be extraordinarily difficult to manage and to maintain.
Well said. And that's why I always try to start with that empathy question, because you're right. We as the adults and we as the leadership need to really make sure we hone in on that to make sure the team is healthy and strong and focused and the work follows. So that's great. Now, there's always things that we want to talk about. We have a great list. Is there something you want to start with? Is there something you want to start to cover? Like, you pick the topic.
I think one thing that I had wanted to mention about was around kind of the modernization within the insurance industry of data and cloud technologies. I don't know if you had any questions about that specifically, but I think that one of the areas people may not be aware of is that the insurance industry and financial services more generally have a lot of old technology. They're older industries. And so back when computers and systems were coming out in a big way in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, these companies invested very heavily in the technology. And the reality is many of these systems from the 80s and the 90s are still in use today. And you'll find this again throughout any financial services company that's been around for more than 30 years, right? And so you have these mainframe systems still. You have COBOL-based systems that provide a lot of the source of the data that we're interested in using. And so that creates a lot of challenges in terms of accessibility of the data, the standardization of the data, and otherwise. And so what you're seeing now is an attempt within the industry to use new cloud technologies in a new way, to take the data out of these systems of record into new data platforms. And that's what I'm focusing on right now, actually, is to build a new data platform in the cloud in AWS that brings data from these old systems of record, these old COBOL-based systems, into an area where you can do modern reporting and analytics much more easily.
You bring up an interesting conversation. I was on the IBM Expert TV show, and we were talking about, there was data, and we were talking about what data can you get? What data do you delete? Right, because you're right, you're going to go through a big transformation. Do you need all of it? Is it okay to delete some of it? How are you going through that decision tree of, or are you just copying it and moving everything? What's going on to make these kind of data deletion decisions?
So that's complicated in our industry because we're heavily regulated. And so there's certain data that we must keep per the rules of our industry, right? So there's certain retention requirements that we have on policies that are not only in force, of course, but also for policies that have been out of force, even for a certain number of years. And so there's the regulatory considerations of data that you have to keep for a certain amount of time. And then there's also the business aspects of how long do you choose to keep data so that you can use it for reporting and analytics. And that has considerations with respect to space and management and overhead, of course. So what we're trying to focus on is around trying to maintain the data that has business value while removing the personal identifiable nature of it from the legacy data so that we can separate the liability of keeping PII for extended periods of time when we don't need it for business purposes, while still being able to use it for reporting and analytics.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. You are in that highly regulated industry, so that might make it a little bit easier to make those business decisions. I always think about which you have to pick or choose data. Which do you keep? So I like there's some framework.
Right, it's not the same, right? As when you're in a regulated industry, it's not, because again, there's a lot of rules that we have to follow, and our company is in many countries across North America, Central America, and South America, and so each of the countries has their own rules for retention and their own rules around data classifications and privacy. So each of these things complicates the rules that we have to follow as we protect the data.
I know you went with AWS, but was there a close second, or like when you did that review, just sharing, public information, just out of curiosity, was it an easy decision, or was it, oh, this is a tough one? We looked at all the systems, and then you ended up with AWS.
From the assessment that we did when we were looking at, obviously the big three vendors are AWS, Google, and Microsoft. When we were looking at all three, what we found was that all three would be able to meet our needs. There weren't any feature gaps or differences that were so significant, right, that we couldn't go with any of the three. So for us, it came down really to, a lot of it was the talent, and it was easier to find and retain AWS skilled people because it's a larger ecosystem. And there was also, for us, when we were working with them, it just worked out from a sales perspective and support perspective that, we were able to work out a deal with them. But a lot of it came down with just talent and finding people to be able to support it, that AWS just had a larger environment of people.
It's so interesting you say that. It's, we, on the one side, you could pick AWS, right? Then, if you even bring it down to, if you want to be in, every platform has that little sweet spot of talent. Mm-hmm. And it is a driver. And it really is a great driver. If I go to this system, or if I use this platform, can I find the talent, whether it be full-time talent or just on Upwork or Fiverr? So right. I appreciate you sharing that.
And you have to think about too, that we made this decision prior to COVID as well, which, if we were doing the decision now, how would that have been different? Because prior to COVID, we were thinking about talent from the perspective of people that were available in New Orleans or would be able to move here. And the world now, we've become obviously virtual, and our expectation that all of our staff work here is different now. So, if we were looking at a more national based talent pool, would we have made a different decision? I don't know. But you do see how COVID is changing the landscape in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to tell you, I think there's some amazing positives out of it. I think the ability to work, remotely, ability to open up your talent pool, ability to do telemedicine. mean, Jesus, there's so many great things. There's a lot of bad things, but I agree there's some nice things coming out of this innovation. And I loved how we started with just the innovation in the house floats. So resilient, we humans are a resilient species. So it's great to see that. Now, sounds like, you're a big company. Do you miss going to the office? Do you miss that? Or are you happy at home? How are you, just when you do your self-reflection, how are you doing?
For me, I find that a mix is the best. My preference would be to be able to split between an office and home. I think that being completely remote is challenging. It's certainly more difficult to create relationships with your coworkers, and particularly when you're dealing with large data projects, there's times where being to get together and literally whiteboard out a solution or a data model or something like that has tremendous value. And those kinds of activities are more challenging to do virtually. Of course you can, and we have, and we are, and we're making it work and doing it quite successfully, I think, but it's just a more challenging activity. So, I think as we look forward to the future, we're going to be having a mix, right? I think, whereas in the past, as I had mentioned, that we were essentially 100% in person, I think that day is never going to come back, right? I think going forward, what we'll find is that we do a lot of the regular work virtually, such as it is, and we'll come together for certain specific reasons, for meetings and workshops and design sessions. And there will be things, I think, that warrant bringing teams together, because there's just certain kinds of activities that are more effective that way. And again, you can force them virtually, and we are, but I think once we're past this phase, we'll find that we'll only come together when there's a need to do so.
I see it the same way. I see it as work remotely, then you just do different type of company like offsites. And I think that's going to just be a lot more fun, because you'll get the late hour drinking, team building, because you're going to maybe be at a hotel resort.
Right.
And then you'll have the day of work, and then you'll just get out of there. So you'll get the refresh, you'll get the recharge. And I 100% agree. When I think about some of the companies that made the early decisions to go remote, I applaud those CEOs, because you just unlocked another stressor from the employees. Like Jack Dorsey, good or bad, right? He was like, nope, work from home forever. He literally put the Twitter headquarters up for lease. So now that unlocked all of the employees. Now you're like, do I have to stay? Are they going to open it back up? I want to move. Should I move? Should I go see my parents? Am I going to go back? Do I have to go? So I just like that, sometimes just making a decision helps unlock stress. Not making a decision causes stress. So I applaud like that decision early on. And I think, when I look back at some good decisions, just decisions in these crises, I just thought that was a very good one. Pro employee, just to get them to get settled.
Very much so. And I think, as you say, there's going to be a lot of silver lining that we find, as difficult and traumatic as this past year has been. And I think as we'll continue to see into 2021, there's a lot that I think organizations and companies are learning about how to manage work and manage people is better, because the industry where I work, it tends to be very traditional. It's been around for a long time, and the company currently where I work as well, there wasn't a vision exactly of how you could take something that was so office based and do it virtually. And then when the experiences and the situations you're in force you to do it, you realize that of course you can. And it's hard to realize how you didn't always do work that way.
Yeah, exactly. And some of these tools are not new, at least to you and I. I mean, Zoom, Skype, video calls, not new. This is not new. Mm-hmm. This is not new. Video. Remember when people be like, oh, you can't do a remote interview. You need to come and interview for the day. We have to see if it's a culture fit. You have to spend a full day with us, blah, blah, blah. Like, just think about, we started on a little bit of an HR tangent, but just think about, from the HR to the talent acquisition part to the work. Zoom wasn't created because of this pandemic. They just had an incredible timing, but I appreciate that at least a lot of these companies have the pipes to do it. And, hopefully the security as well, because we know as you're going to start porting into from home, there's other, data privacy and other issues. But I think technology will catch up on that. So that's great. This is I think for me, one of the big companies, even like yourself, are forced to innovate. If this didn't happen, this would have been on your project plan for the next 2 years, something like this. Now it's no, we got to figure it out in this quarter. So the innovation that I'm seeing at the big companies is just delightful.
It's great. And I think it's one of those things where we had been talking about trying to go more virtually and to support these kinds of models for a while. It's not that we hadn't been thinking about it and saying this is something we should do, but this is the thing that takes the thing you should do, the thing you must do. And it's amazing how quickly that can happen when you have a requirement to do so.
Yeah, exactly. Isn't it great when it's just you have, gun to head, no choice.
Right.
All of a sudden, all these approvals happen. All of a sudden, HR changes policy. All of a sudden, you could do everything. It's just the policies are human driven. Well, and there's also government driven, but some of these policies are human driven. So that's been great. This has been, such a great conversation. The reason why we built the data standard was to connect to the data enthusiasts who might be skewing more to introverts, who might not have the opportunity to meet people. And it's been a lonely year. So we just tried to do this just to kind of get people on a podcast, amplify their brand. And then from here, if it's okay with you, I'd like to connect you with a few of our community members.
Sure.
Because just to battle the loneliness, and eventually everything will get back. But right now when no one's traveling, everyone's got time, it'd be nice to meet people. So that's what we tried to do.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. And this is the Data Standard. We're sponsored by Pandio. And Matt, thanks for being part of this. We'll probably have a party in 2022. And when we do figure that out, you're coming. We might even do it in New Orleans.
It's a great place, I assure you. We'll have a lot of fun.
All right, perfect. Thanks you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Have a great afternoon.
Cool.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.